At any given moment, you're allowed to stop identifying with whoever you were yesterday. Like, if it's got to the point where you are just completely dissatisfied with everything in your life, the type of people that you're attracting, the way that you come across to other people, like, and there's a sense of being frustrated by the way that you show up, and even like your speech patterns may bother you. And some people are so, it's one thing to love and respect your parents, but it's another thing to like every other phrase or sentence that you say involves like, oh, my dad thinks, or my dad says, or my mom says, or my mom did this. Like, you know what I mean? It's at a certain point in time you need to develop your own identity outside of like them, you know? Like at this point, it's gotten to the point where you are just parroting things that your parents have said and you don't really have a true, like authentic identity. But even if it's not something to do with that, some of you may perceive like, oh, well, if I just change who I am, isn't that inauthentic? No, because we're supposed to evolve and change, you know? It's like the people who, they're 15 years old and then they're like, I don't want to grow up, I don't want to change, I don't want to like mature so much that I lose myself, okay? And then that person ends up being like 40 years old and then they're still immature. Like they're, you know what I mean? Like you're supposed to grow, right? And even if you are younger and you're like not even thinking about that, it's this sort of thing of like, oh, if you've always been, I don't know, just an example, like you've always been like the horse girl or whatever, I don't know. People around you may try to like bind you to a certain identity because it's more comfortable for them. And there could be like a multitude of reasons for that, but a lot of it is that like most people don't feel comfortable shifting their identity. That like it implies that they have too much control over themselves that they haven't actually been exercising or whatever. And it may be something like the identity shift always comes from within, so like say you want to shift your whole like aesthetic or like your vibe. um if you just like change the way you dress, that's sort of like it may feel odd or you may feel uncomfortable because you haven't actually done the inner work to shift into alignment with that identity yet. You know what I mean? So it feels like you're wearing a costume as opposed to you actually like being that person. And oftentimes like your physical aesthetic will take its shape after you sort of like shift who you are internally. And like this is even possible if you like I don't know. I know it's like controversial or whatever, but like for me, I literally like um I like cured my own like severe depression and like panic attacks and stuff like that, like without medicine or like therapy or anything, and it did have a lot to do with just like shifting my identity. And obviously it took a lot of time and it took a lot of work and consistency, but it can be done. So don't like project any sort of limitations on you because you're diagnosed with like X, Y, or Z or whatever, because it can still be done. Like, you know what I mean? And there's a sense of like you're not doing your past an injustice and you're not invalidating your experiences by just choosing to not let them be a part of you anymore. Like, say, because I think that a lot of the collective is going to into a place where like it is a sense of like trading places, and I don't really want to get into like who you're trading places with or whatever, but it's just that like you're going to be somewhere that you once were not or like could never even envision yourself being. Or, it's like you're entering the spaces where you thought you were maladaptive daydreaming, to escape your daily life, but in all actuality, you were manifesting your new like reality or whatever, okay? So like when you meet these new people, okay, and you make these new connections, there's no rule saying that you have to tell them anything about like, you know what I mean? Like, if you've made this habit of always explaining to people, like, oh, yeah, my parents got divorced, or like this happened when I was little, or like, oh, this happened, you don't have to identify with any of that. Like, it's a choice, like, you know that that happened to you or whatever, but you don't have to like carry those you can like choose which experiences that you desire to sort of like, it's sort of the sense of like, oh, when you go to like college or something like that, um, I know this is silly. Like when I went to college, I knew some people who would like admit later on that they lied about where their hometown was in order to seem cooler. And don't lie, okay? But I'm just saying that, it's just a whole concept of like when you enter a new space with completely new people, technically they don't know anything about you other than what you tell them and what you show them, okay? So if like everybody from your hometown knows you as the person who like went through X, Y, and Z, you don't have to, like, the new people you meet don't need to know that anybody, they don't need to know that any of that stuff happened to you. You know what I mean? Like you're in obviously like you have to actually become that person before you can like, don't say like don't meet a bunch of new people and like tell them like, "Oh, I'm a writer," but you write like once a year. You know what I mean? You have to sort of and also again, it like starts from within. So don't like your purpose or intention for doing this should not be completely based on like how other people are perceiving you because then it's always going to be like a bit like inauthentic, right? You're allowed to shift your internal identity towards like whoever you want to be for your the sake of your own emotional fulfillment because like I'm telling you, if you think that like, oh, there's a certain type of person that I want to impress or whatever, like there is somebody for everybody. You just have to be so fully rooted in who you truly are, okay? And then like whoever is like a match for that energy will be attracted towards you. You know what I mean? So you don't need to force anything. And honestly, I don't know. For some of you, it may just be like unlearning certain things that you adapted due to like peer pressure and stuff like that. Um, you like lost yourself or whatever by trying to fit in some way, right? Or if there are certain like hardships or bad things that happened to you and you started to like identify with those things, like say I don't know, like if you went through some financial hardship either in childhood or like as an adult or whatever between those, but just whenever, and you start to like identify as somebody who has financial problems or who is like broke or something like that, or it could even have to do with like this, because a lot of people go through this or whatever, but like say if you were always heavier, right? And then you like lose a bunch of weight or whatever, it's that sort of thing of like you can still have that like some people who lose a lot of weight or whatever, they still have that like mindset that they maintained when they were bigger, right? But you can also sort of like do the inner work to shift into a mindset of somebody who doesn't have that, you know what I mean? Like you have to first stop seeing yourself as like the version of you that you don't want to attach yourself to, right? I think this is especially important for like people who used to be addicts or something like that. Like obviously, a part of you always has to like know that you have to be careful around that stuff, to be vigilant, so you don't dial back into those habits, right? But you know what I mean? Like if you have a lot of like pain and guilt associated with like how you behaved in the past, sometimes that shame and guilt can lead to you relapsing into those bad habits. And that doesn't just have to be addicted to substances, that could be addicted to, like, I don't know, you know, somebody being a habitual cheater in the past and they want to genuinely like redeem themselves, like actually, but you have to be serious about it. And you know what I mean? You have to be more honest with yourself. Like, if you can't even be honest with yourself internally, then you're gonna have like trouble or whatever. But like, you don't have to carry the guilt of your past actions with you indefinitely, even into new spaces and with like new people, right? Like, you don't have to disclose, like, you know what I mean? If you can know you can trust yourself to not repeat certain patterns, and I know if you're like a literal, like, if you were an actual addict, it's to the point where like you may need to tell people, like, you know, like, I don't drink, like, you know what I mean, for example, or something like that. Um, but there's just something about if there is like a wound attached to a certain identity that people sort of like villainized you in regards to, you don't have to carry that identity with you forever. You just have to actually change that behavior and like maintain that shift, you know, and then like embody your like the higher version of you in all new connections and scenarios that come forward. You know what I mean? And it is to the point where, like, yes, if you are perceived as like shy and you hate being shy, you can do the work to stop being shy. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, but you have to start identifying with that person who, you know what I mean, doesn't have the same limitations, basically.